Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and joining me for this second Phoenix Roundtable, our community discussion segment for the show, we have returning the internet wordsmith himself, the errant penman, Isarii.
Hello!
You're back.
I'm still here.
You're back.
I haven't been driven off yet.
No, in fact, I think you're going to be on the next episode too, because I've already pre-planned it out. And
oh boy.
Yeah, I know. We just can't get rid of Isarii at this point. It's kind of no, just kidding. Love Isarii. That's why he's here.
You're like that. Can't get rid of him. I have to keep inviting him back for things.
I know. Well, it doesn't help that everything that I decide I'm gonna talk about on these roundtables, I go, wow, Isarii would actually really have a lot of input on this. I'm gonna go ahead and bring him back in.
True. I relentlessly have opinions on everything. It's horrible.
It pretty much is. Now we also have a special guest because this episode we are talking about an essay called Nodes and Nationhood, Player Political Organizations in Ashes of Creation, and that was written by Davlos over here. How you doing, man?
Hello, I just got here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, this got passed around to me by various members. Actually, I know Isarii said he had it first, but it wasn't Isarii who was one of the first people who passed me this essay. It was actually a few other people in one of the unofficial Discords going, hey, have you read this yet? This is fantastic. And they sent me a PDF of this thing. And it is an essay talking about geopolitical structure within Ashes of Creation and kind of like a little bit of theory crafting on that. I fell in love with this paper, and I'm like, I got to get Davlos on here to talk about this because I think it'd be a lot of fun to theory craft and kind of imagine Ashes of Creation in the greater geopolitical ring. How it's going to function, how it's going to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and obviously you're a special guest, so that means I'm going to make you do all the work. And therefore, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself, who you are, what you've been doing in the past, and kind of where you came into the with this paper.
Right. Okay. So my brief background is I kind of fell in love with looking into politics and studying it when I was an unwilling conscript in the Singapore Armed Forces, okay? And just out of pure luck and chance, because neither did I have any choice in choosing my vocation, I became a signals operator. It's somewhere high up in the chain of command, where I became glorified tech support. And so this was 2008, right? Mm-hmm. And Russia was playing games with Georgia back then. And I so happened to be in an armor unit. So for the whole duration of that conflict, all the senior officers of that unit came together to look through the details. And there I was, like the fly on the wall, sitting back there just in case any of the computers screwed up. And over those few weeks, I got really interested in it, even though I didn't participate in it at all, and I wanted to learn more. So when I got off the military, I decided to go to the US for college to study international relations, somewhere in Maryland, where it was near Washington D.C., and I could go to where it became like Disneyland for me. I know a lot of people look at Washington as some kind of like hellhole, but to me it was like, holy wow, like all this history happened here, and it was really, really, really intriguing to me, especially when I live in a country, Singapore, where it's been a one-party state for 50 years. Mm-hmm. Nothing really much changes or happens here, so I end up looking elsewhere to observe what's going on. So this also coincided with my getting involved with EVE Online back in 2006. And it was really different to me because I was into Dark Age of Camelot. Mm-hmm. I was in World of Warcraft, and there was a lot of player agency. Like there were consequences when your ship blew up; it was gone. There was a monetary loss to you. it stabbed you in the heart. You know, when your stuff got blown up, it wasn't like WoW anymore, where you die in a battleground, just wait like 20 seconds, I guess, then you're back again. You know, there was a lot more impact and meaning to it. So I got more into it, and the more I played EVE Online, the more interested I got in the events on geopolitics, and that's how I got to study this. And while I was in school, I had the good fortune of getting an internship with a really, really nice defense think tank in London. I got the opportunity to volunteer a lot in Capitol Hill, and that's how I got really immersed into stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't really get to have a career in this because of the events of 2015 and 2016, when I kind of lost faith in the discipline. I initially wanted to get into academia, but there were a lot of issues which are probably best for yet another podcast. Okay.
I got you. I understand.
Yeah. So I decided to like do something else and make money for myself instead of being in poverty in academia for the rest of my days. And so when Ashes of Creation came out, or rather when it was announced, and there was all this stuff, these concepts of, we're gonna have nodes, players are gonna have to control them, they're gonna have to compete against each other, they're gonna form their own communities and clash against each other. And to me, it had many echoes of EVE Online, and at the same time, it was melding with what I recognized a lot in Arc Age for some reason. I'll also get into that later on. And so when I joined the AOC Discord, the official one, about 2 weeks before the Kickstarter was about to start, I was in Ash's discussion. That place is like a rapid fire machine gun rate of chat. It just scrolls so quickly that sometimes it's really impossible to keep track of it. And a lot of people are saying, when stuff happens in this node, what's going to happen, and sometimes discussion just gets lost. Sometimes the discussion level of discussion is really superficial, and it was very difficult to really talk about the meat and potatoes of what could happen, right? So I tried to go to the forums. The forums had issues. It was eating up posts, and I ended up writing it on Microsoft Word, and here we are.
Yeah, here we are. No, and I know exactly what you mean with the official Discord and the forums and whatnot. Trying to get any type of real discussion in is incredibly difficult. Almost impossible. I'd say it's impossible in the official Discord just because of how many people there are. It disappears in 10 seconds flat. So I appreciated the fact that you sat down and wrote all of this out in detail. Because it's fascinating to see this. And I'm glad that you brought up EVE Online, because on one of our other shows, our general MMO show, we talked about this a little bit pre-show as well. The World War Weeb as it was in there, and that type of emergent gameplay. That
Otaku lips now.
Otaku lips now. I love that pun.
Sticking with it.
I do. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and the really interesting about the emergent gameplay in EVE Online is that World War Weeb, the name, was a play on a previous event called World War B, where it was basically probably the rest of the game dogpiling on Goonswarm and friends, and it was termed World War B because Goonswarm's mascot was a fat flying bee with a style helm, right? So
Yep.
so people ended up calling it World War Weeb. There's a play on how it was all about banning anime on a certain alliance's Discord server.
And
truly the most righteous war that has ever been fought.
Yeah, I think we both talked about this on our last show. I'm like, I don't even play EVE Online because fantasy is my genre, right? But and which is why I'm so excited for Ashes of Creation, because I'm like,
but what greater fantasy is there than destroying the Weeb menace?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it made me want to pick up EVE Online. I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to break out my spreadsheets and kind of look at all these psychedelic colors, but it's going to be amazing, and I want to join in on this. And Ashes of Creation has those ideas for me, those high hopes of things that you can do as a player base that is not dictated by the game, that can be entire alliance wars fought over an argument in Discord. You know, we talked about World of Warcraft and games like that, where if there was a feud in a guild, right, what would happen in that guild? Or in the game, nothing. The guild would probably split. There might have been some, hate thrown in tells or on the official forums, like, don't join this guild, because they're full of jerks or whatnot. But that's pretty much where it would end. Whereas in EVE Online, a simple guild dispute can result in a civil war that takes up half the galaxy, and that's something that we could see something a lot like in Ashes of Creation, just because that guy really made me angry. I'm going to rally up all my people, and we're just going to siege the node that his guild is a citizen of.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even on the Discord servers, right now on the AOC Discord server, there are already guilds which have established grudges already. Like, there's not even a freaking closed alpha right now, and there are guilds who have already set other guilds KOS, like kill on sight.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. Well,
and not surprising, we do love to hate each other here on the internet.
It is true.
Yep.
It is true.
I do.
Yeah,
I do think we should do a little bit of hype tempering before we get back into building it up again. I always like to say I think pre-launch is kind of the most exciting part of a game's life cycle sometimes, especially with how disappointing some MMOs have been recently for the last 10 years. But one of the things that's dangerous is that you have kind of like a broad brushstrokes of what a game's going to turn out to be, and it's really easy to play color by numbers or just fill in the gaps as you're going. It's like a coloring book where we don't really know exactly what the meat of anything is going to be like. We just have sort of an outline. And it's really easy to fill in the gaps in your mind with what you'd like to be in there. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's very, very dangerous. And I think the best example of that was No Man's Sky. Part of that was perpetrated by the developers, one, flat out lying. Two, being intentionally vague, though, which is tough. And I don't think we're going to see anything like that with Ashes in terms of the development team coaching us on. But I think really early on, it's always good to be careful to not be like, oh, it's going to be like this, when we have no idea. And one of the things we do know, just since we're making a lot of EVE comparisons, is that in terms of scale, Ashes of Creation is definitely not going to touch EVE, just because EVE has hundreds of thousands of people on one server. Mm-hmm. Or, well, however many people are playing EVE these days.
Hundreds of thousands of people on one spreadsheet.
But yeah, the fact that it is one galaxy is a really big deal. So Ashes of Creation might have very, very similar experiences, but they are going to be in smaller scale. You're not going to have that one shared history that's accepted by everyone who plays the game.
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to be awesome.
No, that's very true. It is very true. And you made mention, like, we hear about these various wars within EVE, and like you said, it's because anything that happens in that game is affected by everyone. Whereas when this game launches, yeah, there could be a giant war between, DCN and whoever, but does that war affects one server out of 10, 20, 30, however many servers they plan on having, it might not be as such a huge deal. Now, the fun
ultimately, yeah, you're looking at hundreds of people, not tens of thousands of people going to war.
Yeah, and also to add on to what the both of you said about having one big server, I think it's a bit, as well, it's also a bit unrealistic to be expecting a new developer to be coming up with the kind of hardware that can support the entire single cluster of EVE, because the amount of hardware that has gone into that single cluster is what, the top 5 biggest supercomputers in Europe or something like that. That's a
CCP
lot of
was a new dev, right? And Sandbox Interactive is doing the single server thing with Albion. Of course, you have, that's not something you could do with a game that looks like Ashes of Creation, though. You just can't. So, I'm not saying like, oh, I wish they'd done this. I'm just saying the Eve comparisons can paint a really pretty picture that people who maybe aren't super familiar with Eve and exactly how it works might be able to latch onto and go, oh, it's going to be like that. So I wanted to naysay for a minute before we get back to ramping the hype up again.
Oh yeah,
which I'm very much looking forward to doing.
Yes, indeed.
And also conflict being spread out among smaller servers and having like each individual servers getting hyped over conflicts. I don't think that's impossible. It has happened before in the past in Warhammer Online. Yeah, I was in the server named Reckoning. I was in the guild named Dusk Till Dawn, and with the help of allies like XOO, Zen of Onslaught, and a couple other guilds, we got the first sacking of an enemy's capital city. Mm-hmm. And everyone was like hyped over it and say, hey, we're going to do it as well. It's not impossible.
No.
To have the actions of a separate server affecting everybody else.
And I mean, that kind of thing has happened in other games as well. A single server, especially when you hit that point of world first type achievements like what you did there, or maybe something along the lines of a massive mega guild. We're going to use Goon Squad as a thing. There can be 5 Metropolises on a server. They make 5 small guilds and they take over all of them, or rule all of the Metropolises that are there. If, for instance, a group in our alliance came against them, that would be something that would be newsworthy. Something that would, even above anything, would go, wow, all 5 major Metropolises on the server were essentially controlled by one organization, and they got wiped out. I mean, those things can happen. And actually, this is one of the reasons why this... I know, sorry, he kind of brought us down with his hype deflator there. But one of the fun things that we get to talk about with Nodes and Nationhood is this is not really dependent upon the game, only slightly. This is all relating to the human factor. The human factor is what drives this particular system. I mean, obviously the game has to allow this kind of thing, but based on pretty much the things that they're, even during a lot of their Q&As, some of the systems that they're not quite ready to talk about, they're like, they're really vague on these things. But this node system is the one thing that they are sure about, I guess, in the best way. This is the main premise of our game for world building. So therefore, this is the one thing they have no problem talking about. They already have their plans for node stuff already done. So as long as nodes work like they say, or even a semblance of what they say, what we're going to talk about today is theoretically possible, or almost incredibly possible. So let's go ahead.
Yes,
sorry.
That I think makes an excellent jumping off point to the first thing that I wanted to talk about. Just kind of going down the article in order here. Yep. I don't know. Do you want to lead into it?
Yeah, we'll let Davlos here go ahead and take it out. Anarchy of all against all was one of the first subsections you have here, sir.
That's exactly it.
Okay, so Anarchy of all against all. I know that this might seem a bit strange/weird to the lay reader who has not really read a lot of international relations or political theory, because when one speaks of anarchy, they'll think, oh, there's no government, or they might think of people with masks on and hoodies on and just throwing stuff around. No, that's not it. What anarchy refers to is what all these like old school or really like classical political theories like what's his name again? Like Hume and
Thomas Hume is who you?
Yes, Hobbes.
Hobbes.
Hume and Hobbes as well. Yeah. Okay. So Hobbes, when he came out with his political theory, he said, "How do we fix human society?" Right? And then so he came out with this hypothesis of the state of nature, right? Where as I used the quote in this subsection here, is portrayed as a brutal arena where states look for opportunities to take advantage of each other and therefore have little reason to trust each other, right? And Hobbes was also credited with this phrase of everyone's lives being nasty, brutish, and short. Even those who have not read political theory or should recognize this phrase at least. So it describes a scenario where nobody is organized in any tribe at all, and everybody's out for themselves. And so life is hard. So in order to fix that, he came up with his own political theory to organize people together so that they can live in some kind of civilized manner.
Mm-hmm.
That was the premise of Anarchy of All Against All, and so this was my description of how when players spawn in the world in the first 10 minutes, assuming that there are no guilds, this is how players will behave. They'll just be all out to kill each other so that they can have their own individual gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what a lot of people who've never played a game with a free-for-all rule set tend to assume that free-for-all games are like. Is in MMO specifically, because a lot of people have played games like, let's say, Halo 2, where you've got like an FFA 8-person, 16-person match, and they're like, oh yeah, an MMO that's free-for-all is going to be like that, but bigger. And it's not, I guess, an unreasonable like snap take, but I'm a huge fan of free-for-all systems. I like them so much more than just having your faction sort of meaninglessly assigned to you before you even enter the game world. And I'm really excited that Ashes of Creation is going that route for a number of reasons, but we can get there.
And I thought of something like this too. And when I read this of Anarchy of All Against All, the one thing when you have here Thomas Hobbes in his book, The Leviathan, describes humans in a state of nature. In my mind, this is how I see humanity. All humanity is selfish, right? When you hop in, like you said, there's no guilds, there's no anything. You are selfish. It is, what can I do for myself? And you might be like, well, some people, it's very hard to find a person who is selfless, who's going to be like, okay, I'm building this for the good of all. Because there's normally a reason behind this. Why do you build a guild? You build the guild for mostly selfish reasons. I want to progress. I can't do it alone. I need protection. Best way to have that is by having a group of people around me. That's your first base as a person walking into Ashes of Creation. Is everyone is driven by whatever selfish desire it is that they have, whether or not they need to survive, if you will, in this world. How are you going to survive? That's where you start seeing like branching off into guilds and forms of government, because no one wants to be told what to do, right?
That's right.
They want the protection of what a government offers. That's the difference of finding that level of, I need enough protection to accomplish my goals while not being under an iron fist of somebody else.
Hey man, you don't know what some people are into.
Yeah, like because I have received feedback on this piece of on this particular subsection saying, hey, that's a really unrealistic portrayal of humanity. Not everyone's like that. And my counter argument to them is if you have not bought PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds yet, play it. Everyone's gonna kill you, and you'll find that people who play in groups of 2s, 3s, and 4s tend to have an exponentially higher chance of survival.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's a selfish reason.
I'm not sure you can necessarily be extracting things about information about the, base nature of humanity based on behavior in what's essentially a battle royale game type.
But that's what life is. Life is a battle royale game type.
I kind of want to rip apart the armchair philosophy right here, but that's just the tangent no one needs to go down. There's not one accepted viewpoint of humans, base moral nature here, but yeah, I don't disagree with the broader point.
Yeah, but even with I mean that's what it is.
Base communities,
right? And that's the whole form of community, is the need of survival, which is inherently a selfish desire. On almost an animalistic nature, the idea of survival is ingrained in you, and it's that self-preservation, which is instinctual in almost everybody. It actually takes somebody of extraordinary willpower to, like the people who, will say national heroes, soldiers, policemen who protect others. That actually takes someone of incredible willpower to fight the natural instinct of self-preservation. So, all right. We'll go ahead and move on to the next section here. Yeah.
Hey.
Oh yes.
Wait.
Yeah.
Actually,
Before we do, do you have any questions for me about this subsection?
From the Anarchy of no. I honestly, like I said, I was following you along perfectly with that, and like you said, the answer establishment of some type of government. At this point in the game, the people who are even us within Dungeon Crawler Network, what are our goals when we go into here? Forming our guild is ideally the safest way of being in numbers, having protection, and being able to accomplish our goals. So naturally, as we step in, it's something that we're going to do. We're going to plan out of how's the best place to survive. We find the location that we decided is the best location, and we start building our society from there. Which actually, I think, leads into the next section, the race for hegemony. So,
okay, so for the race of hegemony, before I get into this, I'll preface this by saying that especially to those who are familiar with international relations theory, I will admit my bias. I'm an offensive realist. That's why I've quoted Professor John Mearsheimer here, because he's a very preeminent offensive realist, where he states that there are states who are in this state of anarchy, and when given the chance, they will attack each other for their advantage, because there are other forms of realism as well, as defensive realism, classical realism, and then there are other schools of thought like institutionalism, which backs using international organizations like the UN or the EU to keep things together. And then there are other theories like constructivism, where it says everything's a social construct, or I started to say everything's a meme. But it's important, but it's not really the central theme to what I'm trying to get at here. Okay, so the race of hegemony describes in the vein of realism, where I describe that when players start to form groups together, they start to behave like tribes, right? Because the individual person may not be but when groups come together to fight for their own survival and for their own interests, they will start to behave like. And in this mad rush for hegemony, when everyone is starting out in my hypothetical scenario, everyone's going to say, okay, where's the best node? Where are the best resources? Where are the best lines of communication? Where can I arrange my logistics? Where can I set up my market hub? Where can I hide and ambush the most number of caravans to make the most amount of money? These kind of things. So that was what I was trying to get at for this race for hegemony.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in multiple arenas where during early stages, I mean, even in a more realistic sense, the discovery of America, for instance, what was the first explorers doing, trying to find the most fertile, most suitable land that they could use to set up, the most affordable like constructions? Because obviously, if you're sitting there going, first place we land is where we're building a fort. Well, if you build a fort in the middle of a bog, that might be a problem, because you got to deal with elemental effects. You have to deal with possibly the lack of a defensible nature. That when you look at this game, if it were as in a real life scenario, these early alpha beta phases, you are going to see a lot of guilds encouraging their members to get in and test, get in to explore, and try to find out and come together and go, this is where we're going to start. Like when we do our mad rush, this is where we're running. This is where we need to be in order to start off, because during our alpha and beta, this is where I scouted the most amount of whatever particular resource that I would find most beneficial to what we're trying to accomplish. Now, going back into the game section a little bit with this, clearly the idea behind this whole subsection is a group of people trying to, again, a big alliance trying to come together for a common goal. That is what they're attempting to do. Now, how do you feel, like, what kind of measures could be in place to prevent a complete I don't want to say racial takeover, but essentially that's what it is, you know, of one group of people. In case of EVE Online, we had the Goon Squad, which was massive, right? They're massive in almost every game. Like, I remember they had a branch in World of Warcraft, I think during the Wrath days, and they had like 6 guilds because they kept hitting the cap limit of, you know, one entire server was literally just them. Because no one else was, if you weren't part of Goon Squad, you weren't on that server. That's how it was. I'm curious to see and have some theories here about what kind of game mechanics could be put in place to prevent that, I want to say, doomsday scenario where there is no movement, where we reach a certain level of stagnation because of this complete takeover by one homogenic group.
A hegemonic group. Okay, so the scenario that you described with Goon Swarm, or rather with goons in World of Warcraft, it's a very interesting question which I never really considered before, because number one, World of Warcraft has a limited number of players that can be online at the same time. So when we come to Ashes of Creation, where there presumably is going to be a certain limit to how many players that can be on at the same time, it's going to be hard. I'm not going to step back. I'm not going to avoid that fact. But I think there are always going to be ways to counter this effect. Like, let's say if players from a different time zone are recruited, or when players who usually work the night shift are recruited, and they can be brought in to say, hey, can you try to fight back against this? And we know that this certain hegemonic organization is, say, for example, they're always strong in the EU time zone. So let's go recruit people from the US time zone and let them work at it. I think there's always going to be a way to be able to challenge and go up against these large organizations.
And I think Ashes of Creation is going to have more systems baked in to sort of balance out the effect of how big and how powerful your group is. You know, this is something that players have asked about a lot, including me at some point in an interview with Steven. And, you know, one of the answers is, well, we're going to have different slots in a node that'll be taken up by, you know, maybe a guild with 5 members, a guild with 20 members, a guild with 60 members. So there will be different roles for all of them to play. I imagine the biggest ones will still be the big name guilds, you know, bearing the brunt of responsibility for the development of a node. But they won't be able to completely push anybody out of the process unless, you know, again, they're making tiny guilds just to do that for. Any system can be abused.
Yeah, and let's say if I'm going to bring in the example of EVE again, I apologize for constantly using this, but...
it's okay. We're used to that. Isarii does Star Wars Galaxies every chance he gets.
Yeah, I actually have some stuff like that. But yeah, I have a bunch of EVE references in my notes, as well as at least one Star Wars Galaxy one. So don't feel bad about it.
No,
I was going to bring up Imperium at this point anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, so like, for the interest of transparency, I'm also Davlos in EVE Online. I'm in the alliance called a Mercenary Coalition, where we are force multipliers to any client who chooses to hire us. And during this major event named World War B, where we managed to pull off a war against this really, really huge organization, where in the past, if you tried to invade in any corner of their territory, you could bring 400 dudes and they would send 1,000 against you. There was nothing you could do about it until a lot of different smaller alliances got together and said, hey, let's go poke them at like 8 different fronts and let them get distracted and confused. And then we just rolled it all up. But at the same time, what my alliance mainly did was, because we had almost equal representation in all different time zones, US, EU, and the Australian time zone. So in the most recent EVE Online sovereignty mechanics, the structures can be set at a time zone of your choosing. And in the game, the lowest activity of all time zones is the Australian time zone. And when Goon Swarm was faced with such an invasion, they thought, hey, in order to minimize the effects of being invaded, I'm going to set all my structure timers to the Australian time zone and it will be fine. Wrong answer, because when those guys in the Australian time zone, who are usually deprived of content, when they heard this, they were so glad, like they all just got onto it like flies on poop and just like wrote up everything. so when there's always a weaker party, there's also always a way to overcome this kind of challenges.
Right. Absolutely. The next section you had on here, cooperation in a world of anarchy.
Yes.
This is a much smaller section of all of, and it's fairly self-explanatory, but I'm going to go ahead and let you take over that one because I had a few counterpoints, or not counterpoints, but points even to make in here as well. We'll see if they're counter depending on what you say.
Yeah. Okay, so cooperation was pretty much a counterpoint to the ideas which I expressed in the race for hegemony, because hegemony is mostly driven by hard power, if you come to my territory, I'll kill you, if you want to come through here, you must pay X amount of gold or I'll kill you. Right. It's hard power, hard power, hard power. It's always threatening, it's always compelling your neighbors or other players or other groups to do what you want as long as you threaten them. So cooperation is a totally different vein of compelling others to do, and and so cooperation plays upon this idea that using game theory, where if two individuals agree to cooperate with each other, their absolute gains will be much higher, than the absolute gains that each of them would have. So in this paper, I used David Hume's example of having two individuals who must row a boat. If both choose to row, they can successfully move the boat. However, if one does not, the other's effort is wasted because the boat is not going anywhere. Or as another example is called the stag hunt model, where it's this prehistoric time when a tribe of people had to go hunt down a stag, and hunting down a stag was really important because hunting down a stag would give us skin for clothes, would give us meat to last for weeks, and many other useful things that you can use for like the antlers for spears and etc. But it requires a group effort of 12 or more people to come together and hunt this thing down. However, because of man's selfish nature, sometimes part of the group will see a rabbit and they just go off on their own and get the rabbit. However, however, the plan calls for 12 people to work together. If there are only 11 people, they will not get a stag. So this is what I meant by cooperation, where everyone has to stick together. They have to come up with a set of rules to abide by having to cooperate with each other for that mutual benefit. And they will also have to come up with rules that say, hey, if you violate one of these rules, you're gone, or we'll punish you in some way.
Right. Now, my thoughts, including this entire thing, is it depends, in my mind, with this idea of cooperation. The idea of cooperation is only going to come into effect when a group of people realize that they need another group of person, or if the commodities that they are dealing with are of more common stock. And and the reason why I want to pull this in, why would you want to cooperate as a group of players if you say in this game, we'll just argue that Mithril is the highest metal in the game, right? It makes like the best weapons and armor. You're the only one who has it, right?
Okay.
Cooperation at this point, this is where you start getting into the do what I say or I'm going to hurt you kind of benefit, because you don't need anything else. And the reason why I say you don't need anything else is because what you have is so valuable that you can pretty much make your terms, right? Whereas cooperation is more of something along the lines where two smaller organizations, it doesn't even have to be smaller, we'll just say less well-placed organizations realize they can get more benefit by working together, because the amount of resources that they're passing back and forth between one another is of more common stock, that it's just together they can accrue more of it, but there's nothing that makes them special versus any other group of people because they're dealing with the same resources. It's when you start separating out, when someone has a complete monopoly over something. I mean, I'm trying to think of Grapes of Wrath for some reason keeps coming in my head. Whereas in in that particular story, the essentially slave labor had no other choice but to work on these plantation fields or whatnot, because the one who had the resources had all the power. They could deem what they wanted.
You're just describing capitalism.
Yeah,
it's very much true in that regard, though. Like, once you've hit a certain level of personal power, whether it be through whatever the means may be,
equity.
Yes, there you go. You no longer have to reach this level of cooperation. You then demand tribute from the rest.
Yes.
That was my thought on the whole cooperation. It's helpful in the lower stages. And I don't want to say period, because it's always helpful. But it will be more common in the more middle tier stages of development before one group. Because as soon as these two people, this happens all the time in alliances, they break apart. Oh, we're great. We're working together. I have a camera here, so you see my hands going together. Yes. But the second that one of them starts getting an advantage, they start weighing the fact of, what am I doing, or what are these people doing down here that warrants a cooperation? And I'm going to make probably an unpopular statement here, but Britain's exit from the EU, right? If you look at that, which point is it, did they hit a point where they're like, all right, we have the highest economy here. What is the EU doing for us, right?
Oh,
why?
You think Britain made that decision based on metrics? That's cute.
Whatever did the Romans do for us, right?
The premise is there. Like, what did they ever do for us that now you hit a certain level in that relationship where you're like, at this point, these people are bringing me down. Like, we can go farther on our own.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you could either say, okay, these people are bringing me down, or I could make you, to borrow another Eve term, my pets, aka my tributaries or something like that.
You made reference to that with the idea of the fiefdoms. That was what a fiefdom system was. When they became serfs of you, you've reached a level of power that put you above the common plebs. Bringing the Romans into this, the plebs were below. They were more numerous than the why am I drawing a blank on the name of the other group? The Davlos. We talked about this, the history of Rome, and I cannot remember.
Just call them
Greeks.
bourgeois.
No. There were the two social structures. No, by the time the Romans came to power, the Greeks were worse than the plebs.
Yeah, the Greeks thing. Yep.
Yeah. I cannot remember the name of the higher class of people, but they were far more.
Pretty sure it starts with the G.
Pretty sure not. I think it's a P. But anyway, that's regardless of the point. Once you hit a certain level in that social hierarchy where you no longer are receiving the same benefit, you are now moving away from that idea of cooperation and the community or collective structure into more of master-servant structure. And it naturally goes in smaller guilds. I imagine seeing I imagine seeing alliances starting off as a one-on-one equal, but as one group becomes powerful, they are now the head of the alliance, and now they determine who gets to join, who gets removed, and if you don't do what I say, well, then we'll just kill you.
Yeah, or on the other hand, if you don't want to leave and you desperately want to stick around, you can just be useful to me by being meat shields. Why not?
Well, yeah. I mean, at that point in time, that's you. The kings in the castle didn't want to go out and grow their own turnips, but here, you do it. We'll provide you the housing and the security that you want, and you just work the fields for us.
Yeah,
those types of social contracts, I imagine, will be fairly prevalent. Depending on, I can see crafting guilds doing this. Guilds who particularly only like doing crafting and not combat may take a more servant type role in this hierarchy, going, we need protection. We don't have a lot of fighters. We like crafting. We'll do all the crafting and gathering for you. You just protect us.
Yeah. So there was
usually
also
that relationship works the other way around in my experience.
There was also the message that I've been trying to bring out to PvE players and crafters and all those guys alike, because in my guild, Isarii, my GM, I'm very sorry that not mentioned our guild just yet. I'm from Aduro. Aduro, the guild is all about doing what we do. You know, we like to think about strategy. We like to think about how we're going to organize things and get stuff together and pretty much play the metagame and be the metagame. And we have thought about this before. We have looked at a lot of guilds which say, oh, we are PvP only, but it's very narrow and it only affords those kinds of guilds to only be like bit players and not be part of the bigger picture. And so what we are trying to say to our fellow PvE players is you don't need to only be interested in PvP to be relevant, because you are just as useful to us. You know, if you don't like to PvP, you can always join us. We'll offer you protection. We'll give you a secure area to enjoy yourselves and farm dungeons in. And in exchange, our social contract with you is that if you need help, we will be there to defend you. So we are taking a much more broader approach and more balanced approach to that.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely can see that kind of thing being a place. I mean, even DCN is doing something similar. Whereas I preferably in more theme park games, I'm a raider. That's what I like doing. PvE raids. That's what I like doing. However, knowing Ashes of Creation being the way that it is, whatever I'm controlling or whatever I'm running is just one small aspect of what, if we want to be a power in the world, we need to expand out. I have, officers looking at, who in other games, they just like PvP, that's what they like to do.
Yes.
Running specific group squads or whatever within the game to provide that protection for the PvE players is something that would be part of their portfolio of things they need to do. And guilds that are only like doing this, like you said, will end up being the guys who are just there for, a small amount of time and not really making a huge impact in the world because they can't do anything. Like even just the PvP side of things, you need someone to supply you. It's not, you're not going to be able, when your armor breaks, you're not going to PvP with, a stick, generally that's how it rolls.
Yeah.
So node, city mechanics, and nationhood.
Nodes, cities. There we go.
Yeah. Unlike you, I have the paper like right here, and so people watch.
I have it too.
I'm watching it. I think yours is digital though. I printed mine out. I have little handwritten notes everywhere.
I printed out mine too.
Oh, nice. All right, so it's a Isarii zone. It doesn't have the paper. We're cool. Paper.
Yeah, I'm the kind of nerd who still prefers to have paper in hand. That's why I don't have a Kindle just yet.
Is that
I was gonna
nerdy?
say we could go like real old school. Mine's not even paper. Mine's papyrus. Like that's what I printed. Like I just read it. Never mind. Sorry, nerding out there for a minute.
Okay, so node, city mechanics, and
Oh, we're good. You can keep going. Yeah, he's capping us at the moment.
Okay, got it. Right. So node, cities, and nationhood. I'm sorry, I've been extremely busy with work. I've hardly have much time to review this as much as I like to.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it's all cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh yes. Okay. So this isn't so much as hard power now. Okay. So when there are different types of Metropolises and there are different bonuses to be given out to different zones of influence. And I only just realized this like 2 weeks ago, and this was like a couple of weeks after this paper was published, that once a node rises to a higher level, it deprives surrounding nodes of the opportunity to rise as well. Okay, so this can be good and bad for the surrounding nodes, okay? Because on one hand, when a node rises from say level 2 level 3 and everyone else is stuck at level 2, then there's a binary choice to be made for those people who are controlling those surrounding nodes, okay? I'll wait for Isarii to come back.
Yeah, I see. He just got back. He's good.
Okay. Hi, Isarii. We were talking about like node progression and how I only just discovered this mechanic like a couple weeks after I wrote this, and it wasn't included in the paper. I was talking about how like if a node rises to level 3 and the surrounding nodes are only stuck at level 2 because it deprives the surrounding nodes of advancing, then the surrounding level 2 nodes have a binary choice. They either try to fight against the level 3 node and raise it to the ground so that they can advance, or they can reach out to the level 3 node and say, hey, let's cooperate. You are a science node. I'm a military node. You need protection, you need muscle. Let's talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's true. What I think will be more interesting to see is what the motivation ends up being for metropolises to war against each other, since they're, it seems to me, based on what we know so far, that once you've got them built up safely, there's not really any reason for them to go against each other because they can't expand anymore. They're not in competition for anything. I could see them building something in, though. I mean, it's just something we don't know yet, but it's something that I think is interesting.
And it's a theory on my part, especially like you said with the Metropolis. Maybe it's not. Again, there's a couple things in my mind that come there with the node mechanics. First off, with the Metropolis is, what would cause a Metropolis to be besieged? In my mind, it's a smaller node who goes, I'm being stunted because node A is a Metropolis and now controls the entire area. I don't want this. I want to change it. It could also be a group of players who go, we got 5 nodes in the world and everyone decided to level up a military node. I don't know why. It's just the case. And wanting to change the entire structure of how the world's going to be. Because obviously these different nodes having different specializations between scientific, economic, militaristic, and divine, they also determine like the different group aspects that are available to players that are citizens of that node. The other thing I thought of, and I know we have it as a lower point, was maybe we'll have to bring that in here, is each type of node has its own type of election system, right? What do you do when you have one of these super alliances, this race for hegemony, who wanting to control a node, but the node no longer features an election system that's in their favor? And the reason, one idea that we had here, right now, the economic nodes, the elite oligarchy who controls the nodes. If I'm a guy who, for whatever reason, is really good with money, I can come in, I can effectively vote myself into position because I have more money than this other super guild. I mean, I understand that's kind of, in realistic, one person versus a whole collective. But again, people are generally selfish. You know how hard it is. There's a very few people who will go, I'm going to donate money for this one person to be part of a group when I could use the money for my own, my own advancement. I mean, we see that all the time.
So many political jokes I could make right now. But I mean, people do donate in real life to other people.
They do, but they only do what is comfortable enough for them to give away, right?
Sure.
What are they willing to lose? There are very few people without some sort of higher calling or moral calling, if you will, that are willing to give above what is comfortable. I know I'm pulling in a moral here, but I mean, if you look at it in that regard, how many people look at it as, I need to do something greater than myself? Most people don't do that unless they have some other reason for going above and beyond. And in a game, most people don't have that deep moral or like religious aspect to them. I mean, unless they're like really hard into role play. Those type of human interactions exist, but not quite in that the zealotry phase that would exist in the real world. So we have a group of players who now would want to take out a node because it's no longer going Goon Squad, for instance. Again, I'm bringing these guys up because they've been the antagonist in many a game. So I'm sure if any Goon Squad are listening, they probably, agree with this.
You know what you did.
You know what you did.
Well, they probably enjoy being the bad guy, to be honest. I've met at least half a dozen goons who say, yeah, we don't mind being the villain. Yeah. Go ahead. Come at me, bro.
Well, and that type of mentality, we'll just say the PvP, the militaristic, where the strongest PvP player is the one who rules, may be the best type of node. Similarly, the Divine node, where they talked about those who do the more, selfless quest, as we say, that type of node favors the person who has no life. And the reason why I say that is those of us who all have a job. Now, and listen to this. Your standing is based on your religious devotion in one of these nodes. Okay?
Which is quests.
Which is quest. If you could be on 30 hours a day, 20 hours a day and doing nothing but quest, you can just do a sheer amount more than the guy.
Oh my God. I know they've said they hate dailies, but could you imagine if it was just doing dailies?
Well, I imagine
I am the daily king of this server. you can call me Pope Daily the Third.
Pope Daily the Third.
I mean, yeah, and when you mention having a character who's on like 20 hours a day, 7 days a week running quests, it also goes into this emergent behavior of players overcoming or just twisting these rules around. And you can also imagine having a guild of, say, 8 players who share this one account, where they would be doing quests for like 6 hours a shift. They will log off and say, hey, take this one over. Carry on doing this.
Even though that type of behavior is technically against terms of services, so we're not at all condoning any of that, people do that. That's how the arena people in World of Warcraft got to those high levels. They did shifts where you did 6 hours of arena battles, and then when you were done, the next person went on. ESO had the same thing for Emperor. People would play the same account over and for hours, so they could
hopefully Ashes of Creation will have a better design system than ESO.
Well, it's true, but I mean that type of gaming is something that happened when you wanted someone to be Emperor. You got 6 people to line up to do 4 or 5 hours at a time, and your character never left Cyrodiil.
I think the PvP rule set, what is it? The military rule set for node government is going to have a lot of potential for the no-lifer to be in charge as well. Where there's going to be a lot of skill that goes into it, but there's going to be just as much gear, and how geared you are and how gear acquisition works. In the game, we're not really sure yet. Maybe that will be similar to an oligarch type situation where you also have to be good at playing the game at the same time. Where having a guild behind you that supports you, that gears you up, like you'd see, in Eve and Albion and games like that. Is how you end up ruling one of those nodes. But I think it would be interesting if gear is relatively easy to come by, as it often is in games with permanent decay. And, this is mostly a skill-based rule set where, a lone wolf can come in and take over a military node. That would be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if it'll work out that way, but
it would be super cool. It's the chieftain mentality. The guy who walks in, challenges you to single combat, you die. All hail the new Earl. That's essentially what you're looking at in these type of militaristic nodes, right? That's those early tribal settings that favored strength above all else. The one who wins is the one who continues. I mean, even in modern...
I wonder if you'll be able to set the rules of engagement. Like if it can be a naked duel, where you both get level 1 weapons.
If you both agreed. I don't think this is going to be something that can happen. Like, it's whenever the election times come in. It's not like you can be ruling your city, some guy comes in, shoots you in the head with an arrow, and all of a sudden now he is king. It's more of your term of service is over, new election, everyone to the arena, and anyone who registers to fight it out gets to fight it out. That's.
I think that would be interesting though. Now that I'm thinking, to have that built into the game where it could be a naked duel only weapons, only weapons of a certain eye level, or basically just the game ignores them. No magic. For people to be able to set up different rules like that, we've heard Crowfall, or at least early on, that they haven't said anything about this recently, talk about campaigns that way, where maybe we'll have a no magic campaign, or we'll have one where gunpowder has been invented. I think those could be interesting things to see brought into a military style rule set where it might be agreed upon by both parties, or maybe the defender just gets to choose their own rule type, which would be not necessarily a bad thing to help keep some level of stability there.
When gunpowder was just invented, oh god, I'm getting Shogun Total War flashbacks right now.
Indeed, bad things happen.
Yeah. Okay, I digress. Okay, so about the election mechanics of nodes, I know it might be a bit too early to talk about, but I'm really hoping for like a variety of ways which the Metropolis can choose on how people are elected, because sometimes just having 1v1 an arena isn't exactly productive, because especially when I've heard Intrepid Studios talk about how they don't want people to spend most of the time in arenas. They want them to go out there in the world and fight. So if an election is based on 1v1 arenas, you will have a lot of really ambitious people who are really passionate about the game, and they're not out there fighting. They are in the arena, like trying out new ways to beat each other. And that
I would love for them to be non-instanced.
Well,
non-instance with gambling, where like spectators can come in. If this is the fight over the city, I'd want to watch it.
They really might have something like that but
it would have consequence.
Here's how I envision it from a completely system type point of view. And actually, this is fantastic. We're only about halfway through this, or a little bit more. We're probably going to have to break this entire conversation into 2 different podcast episodes at this point. So we'll probably do that. So if you're listening to this, it will probably be 2 episodes. So just be prepared. I could actually see it more along the lines of being very gamey and with seasons. So like you can arena all day. It's not going to affect you. You can do arenas, but like in World of Warcraft was a perfect example when they did their invitational stuff. Like that was different from the standard rated battlegrounds or rated arenas. That's when it counts. So when election time comes up, a special, like your leaderboard from your normal arenas don't matter. It's you now have to enter the election season, and whoever wins the election season are the ones who are promoted in. And like you said, this emergent gameplay, Davlos, is something like you said, you're hoping that there's other ways of election. The other ways of election are go to a different node or level up a different node. That's how I'm foreseeing this.
I honestly hope we don't have anything like leaderboards.
I think they already said there are going to be leaderboards.
I figured we would, but it's such a disappointing way to try to motivate people to do your content. It works fine if it's not a game that's supposed to be like a real world. But for MMOs, and especially one like Ashes of Creation that's trying to say, we're a game of consequence. Like, that's the least consequential thing I could possibly imagine, where you're like, this doesn't tie into any game systems. Here's your placement. Hopefully they can maybe think of something more meaningful to tack on to leaderboards at least.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so on the second part of this subsection, it's talking about having nations. When I'm talking about having nations, I'm not talking about a certain territory or whatever. When I speak about nations, I'm talking about players with their own cultural identity, what kind of culture that they rally around, what kind of people they like, what kind of stuff they like to do together. Like, for example, when I used examples of Gunswarm Alliance again, like the Imperium versus another powerful bloc called PanFam, which is headed by Pandemic Legion and Pandemic Horde and Northern Coalition. Those 2 different organizations have very, very different cultures and playstyles. Gunswarm likes to send 1,000 dudes in your face, and they don't really care so much about whether you have the proper fit. Okay, they do care a lot more now, but in the past they didn't. They just threw a kitchen sink at you. PanFam likes to use very big, heavy, small number, but very powerful doctrines. And So it was always about the horde versus the few, and that's how they always clash against each other. So when I'm talking about having different nations, sometimes metropolises would just fight each other, even though there's no rational reason to fight each other about. Sometimes it could be over a foreign war. Sometimes it could be because the alliance leader was mean to me. It could be as simple and trivial as that.
The Weeaboo Menace.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to actually take this here at the end for this particular side. I want to thank everyone for coming on here. We're going to continue this next week with episode 8. We'll continue this conversation. I want to thank my co-host Isarii and Davlos for coming on for this one, and we'll be back for episode 8 later on. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
See ya.